It's Jess Iszatt here, and I have the absolute pleasure of chatting to 1's Russian, a.k.a. Sam Branson, about Under the Static and, well, it's the debut album. I want to get started with how things were growing up for you in terms of music, because obviously your family has this huge musical history with Richard Branson, your dad literally setting up Virgin Records, early 20s. And so I guess not just for you, but like me and so many other people, we've been brought up with this legacy, but you literally had it in your home. So talk to me about that.
Yeah, of course. Well, look, thanks for being here, and it's always a joy to talk about my biggest passion, apart from being a dad. And yeah, so I mean, obviously, yeah, my family I grew up around music. You know, it wasn't as, you know, if you didn't know, you might presume I was in and out of studios playing on the floor. It wasn't like that sort of vibe. But obviously, Virgin Records was a big part of sort of my dad's life when I was quite young. And you know, I went to some gigs, and I think the main way it fed in was just like, you know, people around who were friends of my parents. Like Roger Taylor's a really close family friend. Peter Gabriel's was a really close family friend. Like these people are just people who I've just been like family friends. And it's only as I've become a grown up and gone, oh my God, that's,
you look back on
wow.
it.
Especially now being, you know, really, you know, into music on a daily basis. It's like, oh my God, these legends. But for me, they were just Roger and Peter. But I'm sure that must have, you know, had an impact on me. I think the person that actually really inspired, so my dad's had a huge history in music, but he's not musical at all. Neither's my mum, but she's like a music tastemaker. So like growing up in the kitchen, there would always be like Simply Red or Ray Charles. And
you've got a great like musical background already for you.
Yeah. Well, that was just more my mum just playing those records, and I used to love it. And she's always had a sharp ear for music.
I mentioned earlier to you when we were talking, I was like, my dad was playing me one-hit wonders. So you've got this like already this education growing up. Did that help form your tastes in music, or were you like, you know what, I'm going to find my musical taste elsewhere?
I mean, it never was a thing for me, really. That was just my childhood.
Yeah.
And then I was a teenager, and you know, as I grew up, it wasn't till I was about 17, and my cousins were playing music, like guitars around the campfire. I was like, fuck, that's cool.
Yeah.
I want to do that. And so that inspired me to pick up the guitar, and I jammed for a while, and I learned Wonderwall, and I played it for 4 years straight, and bled everyone's ears out until they convinced me to learn a few new songs. And then I kind of had a guitar like in the house, and I didn't play that much. I songwrote a bit, and then it kind of drifted away, and I started other careers. But I've always been drawn to music. Like whenever I've watched musicians on stage or I've seen an artist play, it just hits me here. And I've just been like, wow, you're magicians. Like there is just something about this art form that just completely sets me alight. And then as I got older, and I realized I wasn't actually putting much time into my biggest passion, when I watched these artists, I was like so inspired, but also part of me died inside. I was like, I'm not even putting any time into this, but I've got this calling, and there was this sort of, and then when I hit 30, I was like, God, it's quite late in the game, but if I don't put some time and energy into this passion of mine, I'll regret it forever, so.
Do you think there's something in that like you were surrounded by these amazing musicians who were just essentially family friends to you, that kind of maybe stopped you from writing your own music earlier?
I'm sure part of it, and I think with my dad being who he is and his history in music, I think I was comparing myself to the greats when I was a fledgling, and it's like a kid in art school comparing themselves to Picasso. You know, the gap between me as just a young, passionate dude who liked music, who couldn't hardly string, you know, 4 or 5 chords together, and these guys at the top of their game was such a big leap. A, I just didn't think I was any good, and B, it just kind of knocked my confidence. And then also I kind of, I think it took me a long time of growing up and self-growth and perspective to realize none of that matters. If you love something, you put the time and you put the work in, and you make it happen, you know, as best you can, to the best of your ability. And it took me 30 years to pluck up the courage to actually pursue it. So
That's it, isn't it? Because if you were to start something from scratch, if you start comparing yourself to the experts, you're not really going to be able to get going anywhere.
Yeah.
Did you ever have lessons in terms of like piano and guitar?
I had some guitar lessons when I was younger, and I think I missed so many lessons and ran away from him so often he stopped coming, which I kick myself for now because I'm a big believer in the 10,000 hours. And you know, when you see someone who looks unbelievably talented, most likely they started when they were a kid, and they're like 12,000 hours into the game. So I've had to play real catch up, and then since I decided to really pursue music, I've had a lot of singing lessons because that hasn't come naturally to me. I think the thing that's come really naturally to me in the process is the lyric writing. I think my trade is from before music is documentary filmmaking. So it's very story driven. I used to write a lot of poetry when I was younger. So words is where I feel like I get in a flow state. The musical side, the craft side, the guitar playing, the singing, all that side of it is very much skill based. That I've had to really hone those skills.
And when did Waves rush in as not just your artist name, but as a concept? When did that come in?
I think the concept of Waves Rush In has been informed through my whole life experience of just, being, lucky enough to travel the world and experience new cultures and places, and then finding my passion for surfing and ocean conservation and being in the sea, and then also personal growth in terms of waves of emotion and how they kind of come and go. And that phrase, you can't stop the waves, but you can learn to surf, is all tied in there. And
did you make that phrase up?
No, but I definitely was inspired. Some of my lyrics have been inspired by that.
Yeah.
And then I was writing a song one day, and I called it Waves Rush In. And then the person I was working with at the time was like, that would be a really cool name for a music project. And so I changed the name of the song and took the name as my artist name, and or used the name as my artist name, and it's sort of like everything's made up of waves, like sound waves, light waves, and it's this cycle of life. So it pays tribute to nature and our connectedness to it, which is a big source of inspiration for me.
It's one of those things. I think you put your 10,000 hours probably into surfing before that. Would you say that's right? Probably.
Not 10,000, but I've had a few.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. And then now Waves Rush In has come, and it makes sense. So I want to elaborate on the sound waves and the energy and the light waves, and of course oceanic. Is that how you say it? Oceanic waves. Yeah. You believe that they connect us all, right? Tell me a bit more about that. I want to get deeper into that.
Look, we can get deeper into it. I don't get superly deep into it.
Okay.
I'm not like, some people are very ethereal, I suppose, with their depth of concepts. I'm a deep person. Obviously, I think to be a songwriter, you have to be.
Yes.
But I think it's just, for me, it's more just obvious, You have light waves, you have sound waves, you have ocean waves, you have waves of emotion. We are inextricably linked to our environment, and we're one connected, living, breathing organism, and therefore Waves Rush In is just this sense of like all those different sensations, while also the idea I thought was being on stage and waves is rushing in on you as an audience, and you're hearing the music.
It's give and take, isn't it?
Yeah, and it sounds great, and I think my music will appeal to a sort of conscious traveller, a surfer, as someone people who just believe in sharing truth and authenticity, and it sounds like a band. A lot of people goes, "Oh, your band," and it's actually I've used session musicians, and Waves Rush In as my artist name. But I didn't mind that.
Yeah.
I also really was very specific about going into it. If I'm going to go into this, I want to make sure my music stands in its own right. So I didn't want to use my own name, not shying away from it, but just to make sure that when people come across the music, that they hear music first. And so that's why I also wanted a name that was broad enough to do that. And then also, so alongside, I'm trying to kind of find other income streams for the music, because it's very hard to make money and make your music sustainable these days. So I thought Waves Rush In is also a lovely brand for potential merchandising and clothing, lifestyle brand that could be in good relationship with the music too.
Including necklaces, perhaps?
Including necklaces.
I've spotted yours.
Plug.
I'm into gold at the moment, so I've spotted yours.
So the logo is beautiful. It's like a vinyl, it's like an ocean wave, it's like a fossil, it's like the Fibonacci sequence. It's got so many beautiful things to it. So like the idea is that you don't even need to be into the music to want to buy
To get
merch
involved,
and vice versa.
It's on the artwork as well, right?
Yeah.
On the artwork for the album, which we'll get into in just a moment. But also, am I right in thinking that your friend designed that for you initially?
Yeah. So there was my friend Woody, who I went to school with, has a company called Beach. He's helping me do the merch, and he's done the album design. Someone who worked for him originally did the Waves logo. And then a friend of mine who makes jewellery made me this, and I loved it so much. I was like, well, actually, quite a few people were like, "Where'd you get that necklace?"
Yeah.
Which is always a good sign.
I've been like a magpie, I've been like eyeing it up. So,
Yeah, nice.
yeah.
Well, I might have to get you one.
That'd be amazing. Got that on camera, haven't we?
Hey.
So when did you actually first start writing your own music? Because taking that leap, and especially with, like we've spoken about, your growing up and then kind of, coming back to music, always kind of circling back to it. But when did you first put pen to paper? Like, do you remember the first song that you wrote?
I remember the first poem I wrote at school. I won an award for when I was really wee, like 7 or something.
Yeah.
So poetry I've always done a lot of. I think I wrote a couple of songs when I was 17, around that time that I picked up the guitar, and I was quite drawn to doing that and enjoyed it. It was quite fledgling, and then guitar was a part of my life, but nothing big. And then I remember seeing a Grammy artist play this small acoustic gig, and I got a chance to have a cuppa with him afterwards, and I just watched him, and I was just like, wow.
Can I ask who the artist was?
I cannot even remember his name. I know that's awful. But I remember he's like saying how he had basically spent his wanting to do music and nearly gave up and then continued, and he's now won Grammys. And I said to him, how do you do what you do? Go on. Because for me, those musicians, they're magicians. I couldn't understand how they could create such beauty, like just the art form. And obviously I haven't broken it down at that point. And he just said to me, look, if you want to be a good songwriter, you've got to write 1,000 songs. Just write 1,000 songs, and by the time you get to your 1,000th, they're going to be good. And so that I think put the growth mindset of music craft into my mind of I may not be good now, but that doesn't mean I'm not good at music. I just have to put the time and effort and growth into honing the craft, and slowly, where I am now is not going to be as refined as it's going to be in 5-10 years time. So it's just, but you are where you're at, and where I'm at is this, and I'm really proud of where I've got to, and I think this album is a really strong body of work.
I've noticed as well, because you've mentioned guitars a lot, and obviously they formed like a part of your life from a teenager, and you collect them as well, don't you? Talk to me about your guitar collection. I've seen on your socials, you're very proud of them.
Yeah, no, I've got quite a few. I'm not like a guitar tech geek. I'm not like really refined with the knowledge, but I love guitars. I find it very hard to get rid of them once I get them. And it's kind of like art in a way. I just think it's like art that makes sound. So I've got a 12-string Taylor, which is just stunning, and my mum's given me this beautiful resonator with this lovely etching on the back, and I like obscure instruments too. I've got like a hand pan that's the hung, if you've ever seen them, they're like an upside down steel drum.
Oh yes, yeah.
They look like a UFO. My friend Udo made a ukulele. I actually made a guitar myself in Bali out of bamboo, which is a really fun process, and just a whole range of different things. I'm more of an acoustic man. I've got a few electrics, but I'm because I started jamming around a campfire, I'm much more into acoustic sounds and vibes. I'm not really a techie guy. I mean, some people love pedals, love all that, and that can really bring songs to life. I mean, you look what Jimi Hendrix did for blues with plugging his guitar in, but for me, there's nothing beats a beautiful acoustic guitar and playing like that.
I feel like that's how your songs like kind of naturally come to you as well. It sort of starts by tinkling on the guitar. Have you ever written one on a piano? Because I noticed you've got a piano in the studio.
I have, yeah, and I'm not a very good pianist at all. I can smash together a couple of chords, but I think as a songwriting tool, it's amazing, because sometimes with a guitar, it's quite technical, and you're quite involved in what you're doing on the guitar. So it doesn't leave as much space for just kind of like feeling where stuff's coming from. Whereas on the piano, it's literally like chord,
Chords, yeah.
chord, and you just keep it that really simple. And finding melodies, and also there's something just so naturally emotive about the piano. It's definitely something I'd love to explore more.
So I know that Bali was where you first started exploring music properly as a project. Was that before? That was before Waves Rush In was created, wasn't it? Would you say it was there that this project was born, or where in the world were you? Because I know you're very well travelled.
I think Bali was transformative for me because I'd kind of like decided, right, I'm going to put time into music, and I went and decided to live out there with my wife and 2 kids for half the year for 3 years, and we just were like, right, we're having quality family time. Will we have the space to explore while the kids are young? And that time in Bali for me was all about taking the self-critic out of the creative process and learning to be able to just have fun and explore and not be good, and sign up to open mic nights, and found myself smoking clove cigarettes with local Balinese guys in huts out the back of, like wherever, and it was such an important part of the journey that I suppose I didn't get to do when I was younger, which a lot of people do. So that was informative for that. I was in Australia on a hilltop, and I remember just looking at my wife saying, I'm going to pursue music. I have to. I just going to. And I remember videoing myself, but writing a couple of songs. God, I mean, the growth that I've had since then is amazing. But that was a real moment for me. It was the moment I decided I'm really going to do this. And then I had a kind of idea around Love Mafia was my first sort of name, and I've still, may do something with that in the future. But and then it sort of evolved into Waves Rush In, and that was probably just happened in the studio as and when I was writing, I was recording, I was forming contacts. Every contact I've made and everything I've done within the music world has all come off my own experience turning 30 and deciding to pursue it. And I've just sort of followed that energy as and when, and I had no experience in the music scene, and it's obviously so unbelievably different industry compared to when my dad was years ago.
Yeah.
And so it's been a very, very steep learning curve, but I've loved every second. Yeah.
What's your dad's response been, especially to the first song that you showed him?
So he's been very emotionally supportive since I decided to kind of pursue music, and I think when the first song I released was Colours Fade, which was about my granny and my experience of seeing her for the last time before she passed, and obviously it's his mum, so the lyrics were very coming, and the whole song was coming from a very, very authentic place, and I think the emotion comes out in that. And also my co-writer Richard Craker on that song, his granny had recently passed, so it was just really, really beautiful. And I remember driving to her house with the autumn leaves falling, and I was just so aware of the cycle of life as I was seeing her. And obviously that, he was really impressed with that song, and he was like, wow, actually you can really write. And it wasn't until I brought out a song after that, and it was really good, that he was like, shit, he told me, it's like, I thought it was going to be a one-hit wonder. There's no way that you could, one-hit wonder in terms of good song. One-hit wonder not in terms of like stratospheric success, just in terms of songwriting ability. So yeah, no, my parents both of them have been very emotionally supportive. Yeah.
Did you have a sort of like, I don't want him to be too involved in the creative, or did you have a sort of level of involvement that you'd want from them?
From my parents?
Yeah, from your parents.
They have no involvement at all, and I wouldn't want them to anyway.
Sometimes it's like you have to kind of draw those lines, or perhaps it's all just like unspoken.
Well, I think it's a bit confusing because Virgin Records is still a label, Virgin Records, but we haven't been involved for decades. Yeah. So my family don't have an involvement in music
I mean,
anymore.
in terms of like contacts as well, and just like,
But it's been so long.
Yeah,
so,
that's true.
Yeah, and I wouldn't. I have been so aware of, probably overly aware of this in my life. I think naturally with my dad being who he is and so successful and famous, I've been very sensitive to that, and I think because of that, I've very much been driven to seek my own path and do things of my own esteem. And it's interesting, the two major careers I've chosen so far in life have been filmmaking and songwriting and music. And interestingly, I was thinking about this the other day, no one can take away your art that you've created. Like, that is you've done it off your own back. And interestingly, I think subconsciously I've chosen two things that I have to create. I mean, the result is either good or it's not good, or people like it or they don't like it. So so for me, there's something really beautiful about sitting down with my guitar and I create this and it's coming from me and that is it. Here it is, you know.
100%. And so 2 EPs, and then you actually went with the mindset of creating a 3rd EP, didn't you?
Yes.
But instead, we got the debut album.
Well, hey. Yeah.
I just think that's amazing because a lot of the time, the album is something that an artist is not, it's what they're like gearing up to for so long. Did you feel that at all? Like, did you know that that's what was going to happen?
Not at all. It was 2 EPs in, and you know, you never know what the people are going to respond with. I'm a new artist, and actually the first two EPs people responded really well to them, and I was like, okay, it's time for EP3, and I'm going to be writing songs to the day I die. It's definitely my, you know, thing. But you know, to kind of like build waves and be like, okay, it's been, you know, you have a bit of time in between, need a bit of space, re-inspiration. So I was like, I'd mainly worked with Richard Craker and then another producer, David King. We vibed, so I was like, let's get them both in the same space with me, write an EP, and it just set aside 1 week in a beautiful environment, and literally by the end of day 2, we'd written 4 songs. And then we were just like, okay, this is just, the chemistry's working, the vibe is rolling, this is really working, let's just keep writing. And we ended up writing 12 in a week, so.
And it was in the British Virgin Islands, wasn't it? Whereabouts? Whereabouts
it was a place, we were together on a place called Mosquito Island.
Nice.
So I grew up in between, well, I was always schooled in the UK, but I grew up in between there and the BVI, here in the BVI. And my parents have lived there since I was 19. So it's second home for me. Beautiful environment and very apt for waves rush in and you know, being around nature and the ocean, and so being in that setting with 2 people that I, you know, have really great chemistry with, I think has very much informed the sound and vibe of the album too.
I know that like nature and themes of love are big major influences, but have there been any big musical influences on this album? Like, what were you listening to
at the time?
Yeah.
I mean, I listen to everything under the sun. If it has the power to change my mood, I like it. I'm always lean more into soul music, actually. Old music, that's what really gets me going.
You can definitely hear that in this.
Can you?
I feel like the sort of old soul in some of the more swaggy songs. Yeah.
Okay. No, it's. But I think I mean, there's definitely, like, as any songwriter knows, you can find inspiration from different places or ideas or a vibe, or you need a bit of stimulation. You can listen to a track, and you know, so it comes from lots of different places. But the individual songs, there's aspects of things that have come out, but you never know what's informed it. It might have been listening to, you know, a song when you were 12, or it could have been something you heard on the radio last week, or it could have been something you heard as a score for a film. But yeah.
I know we spoke briefly, and I know that you had actually sent, when the album had been finished, to Ed Sheeran to have a look at the track listing. Did you actually send it to anyone else we might know who informed any of it?
No, or maybe it's a couple of mates, but no, Ed, I luckily got the chance to meet years ago, because my sister and her husband were following him around churches when he was playing, and then invited him to play at their wedding, and then in between there and him playing at the wedding, he went stratospheric. Well, like, had his first #1, and they thought he was never going to turn up to play at that wedding, and he did. And I had the chance to meet him. He's always just been the most lovely, down-to-earth, sweet human bloke. He really is a special dude. So you know, obviously, like, I was like, I've just written my first album. I've got to
Who can I
send it
get?
to
Who's
him.
got the expertise?
Yeah,
to
I mean, he's
help
a
me out?
master. He's an absolute master at what he does, as we all know. Like, and so to have the opportunity to just say, look, I'm trying to pick my singles for the album. What do you think? And he gave me his thoughts, and so that was really helpful.
He's always been very vocal about supporting new music and like different parts as well. So, were there any surprising choices, like comments that he made?
No, well, yeah. I mean, he was really enamoured by the album. I think he was quite surprised and
That's so
impressed.
flattering, isn't
which
it?
was really, really flattering. I mean, for me, the biggest stamp of approval comes from someone who is in the craft, who knows the work it takes, who has overcome the fears, who's stepped into doing it. And I mean, he's a great example of that. So it was really, really a confidence boosting. And the album, the single choices were not too dissimilar from what I thought they should be. Yeah, it was just really affirming.
It struck me that the energy of the whole album is overwhelmingly positive. Is that fair to say?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I hope so.
Was that like a conscious decision? Did you want this project to be like that?
Yeah, definitely. I think some of my earlier songs were very much in the process of growing in confidence with my music, and some of it's quite reflective and some of it's quite moving and some of it's quite, and with this one I was like, okay, I was really aware of music uplifting people being a gift in itself. And for me in my life, just listening to great tunes that lift my mood and my spirit. So I wanted it to, have the breadth of emotion that a good album should, but also to leave people feeling more uplifted and warmer because of it.
At what point did you know that the album was done? Like, did you plan to be away for a week and then at the end of the week you were like, oh, it has to be done by the end of the week? Or, yeah, at what point was that? It's like, that's it. That's the album.
We just kept pumping tunes out. We just carried our guitars, and suddenly out of nowhere there'd be another vibe going, and there'd be an energy happening, and we'd be like, and it just was it was a highlight of my year last year. It was literally like doing something I loved so much with people I absolutely adore in a beautiful environment, and the chemistry just worked, and the way that we write together worked really well. We all have different skill sets but overlap in different ways, and the energy I think that we were all feeling together really comes across in the album. But yeah, the intention for sure is leave people feeling better because of listening to it.
It still blows my mind that you finished this whole project in a week.
Yeah.
How long did you know the producers before? How did you meet them before?
So I had met. So I actually went on a random motorbike trip in England. Ended up at a pub for lunch, and I was chatting with this guy next to me I'd never met before, and I was like, "Oh, who do you know?" And he goes, "I don't know anyone. I just got invited to this WhatsApp chat because I like motorbikes." And I was like, "Oh, great! You're my type of guy. I like that. You're just well up for it." Got chatting. He was a songwriter. He said, let's have a writing session. And he brought Rich with him the next week. They arrive, it's all a bit awkward naturally, just first meeting each other. We're about to go out for a writing session. As we're walking out, the Pilates teacher arrived, and I was like, oh God, I forgot. It's like, guys, I can either ask her to go or we could do Pilates. It's a good way to get into the spirit.
Yeah.
Oh God, I can't believe I'm telling the story. And so they were like, let's do it. So it was like spring, and we were like doing all the stretching on the court, and I remember doing cat-cow, and I just felt this whiff of air over my bottom. And I was like, oh my God. And Rich was behind me, and I was like, have I got a whiff in my shorts? And he was like, yeah. And then we all just burst out laughing.
Oh my God.
Basically, poor guy. We'd only literally met 5 minutes before. So anyway, I went and changed, but at least the ice was completely broken.
Yeah, I was gonna
Went
say.
into a writing session, and that first session we wrote Living in the Light, which is on the first EP. And then David King I met through my management, Whole Entertainment, and we just started, jamming and writing together, and then I've worked with him a bit, and I just basically was like, I've worked with these two guys, love the vibe that we've created together, let's all get in one space and see what comes out of it.
Let's do it together. Yeah, because the whole energy of the album, very positive, but it just sounds like you've had so much fun creating the album as well. Outside of I guess inside of the recording as well, Yeah, what was it like just hanging out with those two for a week?
Oh, it was amazing. It was just, thing is, I think for me, having not pursued my passion or not had the courage to pursue my passion for so long, every minute I'm spending doing it, I'm just so overwhelmed with gratitude to be doing what I love.
Yeah.
I remember when I decided I was going to kind of do this, I was like, okay, I need to play catch up so I signed up to ICMP and did a music course at ICMP, and I remember being, I've got 2 children, I'm married, I'm not a spring chicken. And I was there with like 18-year-olds who were just learning music, and they were really passionate about what they were doing, but they kind of took it for granted because that's the first thing they did. Whereas I was sitting there front of the class with notes, just like, oh my God, music,
Right at the front.
And I think because of that, it's just given me such a sense of gratitude. And when you're grateful, you're much more positive, and so. And actually, to work with talents like Dave and Rich has been a blessing because they've lent me up in places that I've needed to grow in and inspired me. And there's so much that I bring to the table in terms of conception and lyrics and narrative and music and melody. But the kind of mix between the three of us just clicked. Yeah.
And obviously, the end of the week, it came together. When you got the mixed and mastered copies back, the fully formed album, when was that? That must have been later on?
So after the writing week, we literally sketched down every idea because otherwise you just forget the songs. Then I managed to get together with Rich a few months later here in Oxford. And we did all the recording in 1 week. Obviously, there was bits added later, but in terms of all the vocals, down in 1 week, which is full on. And then we added some bells and whistles and kept fine tuning the mix, and then sent it to Metropolis. Stuart Hawkes mastered it.
Nice.
And I remember just putting it in my car and just like grinning from ear to ear, like I can't fucking believe this is my album. Amazing. And some people don't like to listen to their own art. I love it. I love listening to my songs. They make me feel good.
It's always the litmus test, isn't it, of listening to it in the car, isn't it? You have to sit and listen to it like you're a listener rather than the creator. Can you separate that when you're listening back?
Not at first, no, not at all. Especially when you need that. My view is there is no place for the self-critic in the creative process. All you do is hinder the creativity. Then you save it up for when you need to fine tune and you go, right, my analytical ear, you're literally cherry picking, you're literally little moments. And then you need some space from it. And so if you've had enough time and space from it, then you can come in objectively. And then you can never be fully just the listener, but you can do a pretty good job of it. Yeah.
I noticed in Under the Static, the title track from the album, you say underneath the static is where you find who you really are. Do you think you found that in this album?
For who I am right now, yeah. We evolve. We all evolve. If I'd written an album 10 years ago, it would be very different, and the next one I write is going to be different from this. And I'm a big believer in everything is right for where it is at the time. So, yes, for now.
For now.
For now.
TBC.
TBC.
Is there another album on the way?
TBE, to be evolved.
To be evolved. There we go. I prefer that as well.
Nice.
Right, so the physical copy, I noticed that you have physical copies. Was it important for you to have vinyl?
Do you know what? It's mega.
Yeah.
In the sense of like, I cannot believe I'm going to have a vinyl of my music. There's something so, I don't know, just so much in that. I think part of me is learning as I go, and I was like, what, people still listen to CDs? I can't even remember a car that I've had in the last 5 years that's had 10 years or however long, or anywhere in the world that I go and there's actually a CD player. And then vinyl's had a huge resurgence, and there's, I'm a bit on the side into, frequencies and solfeggio frequencies and learning about the science of sound and how actually a lot of the sort of healing properties of listening to music are stripped out when you digitize it and compress it. So the idea of listening to my album on a vinyl where I can actually get the vibrational frequency of the sound, I think is quite exciting too.
Well, I've noticed a very gorgeous purple vinyl that you've got as well, and then obviously you've got the one with the logo, also the necklaces too. So I'm excited for what's in store for this. Let's finish on what you hope listeners to take away from the album after listening to it.
I hope I take them on a journey. I hope they feel like they want to listen to the whole album in one sitting, because I think in this day and age that's quite rare. And I hope they get taken through a whole range of emotions, but at the end of it feel like they've had some catharsis, feel inspired, feel more connected, and I always say warmer. Not that that's an emotion, but that's the feeling. I just want people to feel like they've been held through a journey, and at the end of it, they just feel warmer because of it.
I love that. Sam, Waves Rush In, thank you so much.
Thanks for your time.